Welcome back, guys. Mr. Boreen here again. I got video number 2 for you on the Networks of Exchange Unit 2 review series. If you have not watched Unit number 1, you're definitely going to want to watch Unit number 1 and then watch the first part of Unit number 2 so that everything here makes sense, because in a lot of ways we're telling a story. And our story today brings us to the Mongols. In the Unit 2 Silk Road Networks of Exchange video that I posted earlier, one of the things that we talked about was the idea that the Silk Road was an ancient trading network, but for a couple hundred years it had really fallen out of favor. And one of the main reasons for that was that the region in between, like the Song Dynasty in the east and the Abbasid Caliphate in the west, was really lawless territory. And so if you were a merchant or you were a state thinking about participating in inter-regional trade, one of the really main drawbacks was going to be the high likelihood that your trade emissaries, your caravans, which we'll talk about them in a little bit, would be robbed by somebody or hijacked when they got to the next trade hub by the emperor of that territory, and you would lose a lot of money and product, and it just really becomes a barrier to trade. Why trade if it's just going to be a net losing proposition for you? All of that changes with the rise of the Mongols, and the Mongols bring a lot of stability. One of the things we talked about in our flagship podcast, Storytime with a Historist, was the idea that the Mongols brought a lot of creativity along with destruction. So let's hop into this a little bit and see how the Mongols really guaranteed Silk Road trade and really restarted the Silk Road and kickstarted a golden age of trade for the next, really couple 200-300 years coming out of Asia. Now, a real quick look at this map will show you that the Mongol territory basically stretches over here in the western part from the Abbasid Caliphate, and this will be part of the Il Khanate, all the way across Central Asia, the steppe, into the region that was controlled by the Song Dynasty and was part of the greater Mongol Empire. And this entire Mongol Khanate, if we think about it, is one singular political zone, which is admittedly problematic, but for us, we can think about it as one singular greater political zone. All of that territory also encompasses the Silk Road, right? And you can see Genghis Khan and his armies moving almost exclusively on Silk Road trade routes. So once the Mongols are able to dominate this territory, they can bring a lot of stability to it. And that will create a greater likelihood that trade goods that would start, let's say here, let's take a bolt of silk and move it from what had formerly been the Song Dynasty across the empire all the way into like Baghdad. Or let's take it all the way to the end and go to Anatolia right here in what is now modern-day Turkey. You could move those goods, and with a really high degree of certainty, given the reputation of the Mongol warriors, that it's not going to be ripped off or destroyed. And we know, again, go back and listen to our Pax Mongolica episode, anybody in the central region who defied the Mongols were met with death and destruction. So the Mongols create a guaranteed system of trade in large part because of who they are. So let's check out who they are. Now, the Mongols are a steppe people. The steppe is a geographic region. It's this flat, open region. Think about like North Dakota or South Dakota here in the United States. Wide open territory, lots of grassland, perfect territory for a horse. And it lends itself very greatly to a nomadic lifestyle, just like in the North American, Native American tribes that had been established before the creation of the United States of America. You see lots of people moving around a region in a territory like this because they have to follow the seasons, they have to follow the food, they have to follow the game. And it creates people who are used to being on the move. And I bring all of that up because nomadic people who are consistently on the move also tend to be really good traders. They know how to move around and they can facilitate the movement of goods from one area to another. So right there in the Mongol DNA is going to be a willingness to participate with other people, mainly by necessity. All right. You had to move, you had to be able to procure resources, and you had to be tough because you're living in this really, really tough environment. And so add all of those things together, think about our networks of exchange. One of the things that you're going to see really readily is that this is a tailor-made people for trade. And it then comes as no surprise that when the Mongols really establish their greater empire, that they're going to create a really strong system of trade. But it doesn't just go along with like they lived on the plains and they're nomadic, therefore they're automatically going to be good traders. There's also some cultural values that really made for more equal social systems, elevated merchants out of especially in like Chinese territory where merchants were much lower. Again, check out the previous video for more more on that. And what the Mongols bring from a cultural perspective is this idea of equality. And the Mongol equality comes from their warrior class, where everybody got to participate equally in the spoils of war. But once the fighting is over, that's going to be an extended cultural practice that's going to create for more social equality within the empire, right? Now, in terms of why would everybody be equal? Well, because to be a Mongol warrior, you had to be a good horseman. You had to be able to ride. You had to be able to care for yourself. You had to be able to participate equally in battle. You had to be interchangeable with the other soldiers around you. You had to develop skills and you had to become trustworthy. And again, a lot of these same sorts of skills that made the Mongol warrior a really good warrior were also skills that were really necessary to be a good trader. The Mongols were also not culturally rigid. We can see that through their practices of warfare, right? They're adaptable, right? They'll utilize movement. They'll utilize their heavy cavalry for attacks, but then later they'll adapt to siege warfare based on the fact that they're attacking cities. And you might think to yourself, well, why does that matter for trade? You're talking about military stuff now, but this is a civilization and a culture that's willing to change. And when they get into a new area, they will force change, right? They'll utilize their surrender or die policy as a way of forcing people to either take on Mongol values or be destroyed by the Mongols, right? And what ends up happening then is the people in that region also have to submit to these Mongol cultural values of equality, of adaptability. And what ends up happening is that we start to see, for those people who submit, that they will become traders. And if you don't submit, well, then look what happens. You'll see the destruction of the territory. You'll see the destruction of everybody around you. And then the Mongols will just move in somebody to that territory who will live by the Mongol rules, right? And if the Mongols value trade and the Mongols understand that movement is a necessity for them, and so they're going to be maximizing movement within their empire, it makes a lot of sense that they would want to make sure that movement is guaranteed. And all of that is important because people aren't the only things moving. Trade goods are going to move right behind those Mongol armies. So the Mongol way of life, the system of warfare, the values of their culture, all really coincide very nicely with the reestablishment of trade. Right? Now, it would be folly to say that, oh, the Mongols are here, so trade just happened, right? A couple things needed to occur to make sure that trade actually could like be feasible within the empire, right? So the first system that the Mongols do is they create this yawm system, right? This system is, you can think about it as kind of like a post system today, maybe a first World Wide Web type proto-internet, where you're going to have the movement and exchange of people and goods and ideas and information all across the Mongol Empire. They're going to do this with these golden passports that are carried by Mongol riders, and there's going to be these little stations that are set up along the way to facilitate the movement of the yawm riders. Now, that's really, really important for us because the yawm system basically creates outposts and establishes a Mongol presence. Now, if you're a person who's out there on a trade route, you can almost be assured that somewhere close by are Mongols. And if Mongols are close by, Mongol violence is close by. And if Mongol violence is close by, it means that people who are tending to want to do bad to you are going to think twice, because anybody traveling on a Mongol road is guaranteed Mongol protection, that idea of equality. Now, if you're going to rob any merchant, if you're going to try to attack any caravan, this group, these long strings of camels and carts carrying all these different goods, that's a caravan. Now, if that's attacked by some sort of robbers, you know that that attack is going to be met 10 times, 100 times with more brutality as a result of you ripping off the Mongols, right? So now trade is a little bit more free flowing, and all of that is basically guaranteed because of the fact that the yawm system is out there, which means Mongols are out there. That in turn leads to a rise in the reestablishment and recreation of the caravanserai. Now, a caravanserai is different than a caravan. And I know when we were doing this unit during the school year, there was some interchangeability in students' minds between those two terms. Those are different. A caravan, again, is that long string of merchants. Think about a guy holding the reins of a camel, walking it in a caravan or string of 50 camels. So you count up 50 camels, each one of those camels loaded up with all sorts of goods, spices, silk, fruit, whatever. Go back to the first presentation to see what was moving on these caravans. A caravanserai, it's kind of like a rest stop / motel is a good way of thinking about it. It's a guaranteed place where merchants could stop. They could do a little bit of trading. They could resupply. They can get water for their horses or camels. They could rest comfortably and securely, again, because a lot of these caravanserai are on the same yawm system network that the Mongols are guaranteeing as well. So you've got the Mongols out there guaranteeing peace basically through their presence, which emboldens some of the inter-hub cities to create more caravanserai as places where people can go to do smaller amounts of trading, or just profit on the movement of merchants who are coming through, right? Because you could set up little shops for resupply, and now your small town, it's like being linked into a major highway. People stop on that highway, they get gas, they get food, they might stop and sleep there for the night. You're creating revenue for your town. And so what we start to see is along the reestablished Silk Road, we start to see this flowering and growth of more trade, more economic creation and innovation, and we start to see more and more people living in these regions, which then gets you in this positive feedback loop of more creation, and you're off and running again, right? So the Mongols are instrumental in recreating the Silk Road, right? And that's important because that's going to link us in to the sand roads, salt roads, or the Trans-Saharan Trade Network in our last video. Okay. At this point in time, though, the stage is really set. We've got traders in Eurasia networking across the entirety of the continent. You've got Vikings coming in. You've got these nexus areas like inside of the Abbasid Caliphate, where we're seeing lots of growth of culture and technology, famously at the Baghdad House of Wisdom, which really flourishes right around the same time that the Mongols are growing and expanding, in large part because of guaranteed peace and stability. What we're starting to see here is that more trade leads to more innovation leads to more trade, more innovation and more trade lead to stronger cultures, stronger political empires, stronger economic processes, like think production, modes of production. And what we start to see is humanity really getting back to the place it was in prior to the fall of the Roman Empire, the Han Dynasty, and the Gupta Empire, that really kicked off this like Dark Age time period that happens immediately before our unit number 1. And as people begin to observe all of the trade that's taking place and all the benefits of trade, what they start to see is more movement is better. And of course, that's going to be hugely impactful as we start moving into our next sets of units when we get to exploration and the quest for more resources and more markets, right? So if you think about the continuum of everything we've done so far in AP World History for this entire school year, the reestablishment of the Silk Roads, mainly through the guarantee of Mongol protection, really jumpstarts a golden age for humanity, right? So we cannot underplay the value of the Mongols in the creation of both the Silk Road, but also the creation of the idea of trade beginning better economic systems, which begets stronger political power, which begets more social mobility, and starts to create, dare I say it, the early modern world. All right. So go back through this video, go back through some of the Mongol readings and notes. As always, check out the study guides and review materials that we're posting for you. Got some good background information that could definitely help you guys out on a DBQ, some EBD, some context, and I will be hitting you up with video number 3, the Sand Roads in the Trans-Saharan Network, next time. Have a good one, guys. Bye.